I never paid for an owner lead.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with Brittany Blackman. She's the founder at Discover Freedom, and also she was the founder at British Rentals, company that she then went on and sold.
I started maybe around 40 properties, and then we were up to 115 when I left.
What worked for you the most as far as growing the portfolio that you were managing?
Really falling back on what I had learned about my personal brand. If we got in front of 100 people and we were a constant name, it's not necessarily who speaks the loudest, it's who's consistent.
You worked for 9 years with Gibson Beach Rentals and Realty before. What do you take from those 9 years?
That was the biggest thing that I took away and started with.
Let's talk about the process of selling. Tell us a little bit about what you learned throughout this process.
I feel like if you don't refocus as needed, you're going to wind up with resentment. That's not good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we bring together entrepreneurs, founders, leaders, operators, and investors in this space so they can tell us more about their journeys, the lessons that they have learned along the way in building their businesses, as well as perhaps some of the mistakes that they might have made along the way so we can avoid making those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Brittany Blackman. She's the founder at Discover Freedom, and also she was the founder at British Rentals, company that she then went on and sold, which we'll get into later as far as the story goes. So Brittany, thank you so much for taking the time. Before we get started, where are you taking this call from?
Thank you so much. I am located in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, which is in the Florida Panhandle.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, Brittany, before we get into the timeline of your story, we want to understand, talking about learning from mistakes and lessons that, we've gotten along the way. What would you say has been your biggest mistake that you've learned the most from at the same time as well?
Great question. I think for me, in some reflection recently, it has been not having healthy boundaries. And that's really hard when you start your own business because you want to say yes to everyone and everything. And I feel like as a woman, you have that nurture and that caring aspect, right? That you're supposed to take care of everybody else. And while I have a huge servant's heart and I do love taking care of everyone else, if you sacrifice yourself in there so much, that can be detrimental to your health, your mental health, your physical health, your relationships, and your business. I will say I didn't let anything get to a crazy point, but I do wish if I could go back in time that I had set some different boundaries for myself and really understood how that was going to impact my personal and professional life.
That's very interesting. And just so that we can drive this home in terms of how we can learn from that lesson and apply it in the vacation rental context. It's tough, right? Because you are in the middle between owners and guests. And, where do you draw the line and who do you decide to, take the side of is always a challenge for property managers. So what exactly, did you start doing after you came to this realization, that you had to, put more boundaries that changed perhaps the way that you were dealing with your guests or with your owners?
For me, I think it was all really simple stuff, but it just seemed so big in my head. So it was as simple as when I eat dinner, I need to turn my phone off because if my phone's on, it is going to ring. And so I got to that point where if I was trying to eat a meal, I needed to turn my phone off so I could have maybe 30 minutes of just zero interruption. Same thing with email and text messages, all those things. Like, it's so amazing that technology is right at our fingertips, but that also means that work follows you everywhere. And again, I was not perfect by any means of it. But I think that can be helpful to people of understanding, like, I know that you want to take care of others, but if you don't have a turn off time for yourself and give yourself that, you're just going to spiral and have this need to respond and want to do things. So those, honestly, the time, trying to eat and then controlling when you respond to emails and stuff like that, and are in service, are two of the most simplistic ways that you can do it. And I'd say the third one is, like, find something that brings you joy, that gives you happiness, and make sure you do it. It could look like going to the gym, taking a walk, sitting and petting your dogs while drinking a cup of coffee, but like whatever it is, but find one simple thing and make sure that you do it every single day for yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Great point. So let's get into your story now, Brittany. What can you tell us about your background and how you got into the vacation rental and hospitality world?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from North Georgia. I moved to Destin shortly after graduating high school, and I've always at that point been involved in retail and restaurants, different sides of hospitality, and then had a few jobs when I moved to Destin. Wound up finding this vacation rental company. I had no idea what this was, but sure, why not? Let's try it out. And so that was probably about 13 years ago now, and that was my introduction into the industry. Fast forward, I worked with the first company for about 9 years, started as a reservationist, worked up to ops manager, was for the most part running the company, and then actually left in 2020 and for some insane reason, decided to start my own vacation rental company
Well,
right after the pandemic.
let's understand what that insane reason was, because yeah, where was your head at back then, and what led you to want to start your own thing?
Thanks for slowing me down. That it was very impactful. So I came from an environment of entrepreneurial spirit. My parents had their own businesses, worked in small businesses. I just grew up in that environment. So it was a huge goal of mine to have my own business. I love vacation rentals and the industry. I love the people in it, what we do. And so for me, I wanted to buy that company. It wasn't the right time for those owners. And I was that serious that I thought travel was going to come back. I was like, I don't care what happens in the world. People have to travel. And so, huge risk. It was in the fall, so stuff had started slowly opening back up. But yeah, it was just a huge leap of being able to have something that I called mine. And I hit the ground running with it for the past 4 years.
So just so that I get this right, and for context, and also for the timeline to be clear. So you worked for 9 years, right, with Gibson Beach Rentals and Realty before you were in a position to, or decided to start your own thing. So you had learned how this industry works, how the business model of property management works. So that was kind of like your education, right? It seems like. So what do you take from those 9 years as far as learnings that you decide to either do differently or similarly when you were starting your own company?
Love that question. I took so much with me. I've always said that this industry could never be put in a book. Like, you're never going to read a textbook that tells you everything that you're going to experience. And so I would say there were a lot of good callous moments of, I was super emotional all the time about everything. And that kind of dissipated a little bit, or I learned to control it a little bit better over time. So if a guest was upset, an owner was upset, an employee was upset, I wasn't crying in the corner every day by the end of 9 years, which was nice. From the business perspective, it was standardization. That was probably the biggest thing that I took away and started with Breathe Easy, was that, okay, I'm doing this on my own. I want to grow to about 30 to 50 properties. And I know what all goes into this industry and all the things you prep for. And then all this other stuff flies at you. But the one thing I could control was standardization of linens, some amenities, processes, anything that I could control and set a system to had my focus from the very beginning. Again, that also allows you to scale your business, to hire more people. If you don't have any of those standardizations, it's just hard. And speaking to boundaries, I guess a part of that was that I got pushed quite a bit with prospective owners on some of the thoughts and how I was running things, and the linens I would use and stuff like that. And that was one thing I was really good about, as I had my boundaries, was that, because I was like, I need to be a property manager, not chase your comforter around. So you're going to use my comforters. So, all of that just helped me be efficient and really focus on what I needed to in the business versus what I'm going to say are kind of some of the smaller annoying things.
That's interesting. And when you say standardization, I'm curious to know, when it comes to this company that you were working for originally, was this a company that, had a lot of scale already when you joined them, or was it more so like you had to, kind of build it also as well from the ground up as far as those standardization processes goes? I'm asking because you said that you wanted it to be, your company when you were starting it, a company of, 30 to 50 properties under management. So I'm trying to get to where that number comes from. Was it because you saw that, okay, more than that, I lose the ability to standardize, and I rather be boutique than massive? Or, help me understand, how you got to that conclusion of the size of a company you wanted to have.
When I started at Gibson, they were not in the best of places. Easiest way to say it is we were over-promising and under-delivering. And so those are never fun conversations to have. And so we had, I believe when I started, maybe around 40 properties. And then after the 9 years, I think we were up to about 100, between 100 and 115 when I left. So we had grown it significantly. And obviously with that comes a lot of lessons. We had some standardization in place, but to me, not enough. It's hard when you're at that scale to try to reverse engineer it. It's much easier starting out to start it one way and maybe make little tweaks, but have systems in place. And so with that said, I did realize afterwards how different the experience is for mainly the owners, but also everything affects everything in the business. So guests feel it too, right? But when you have a company that's got 75, 100 plus, just your staffing is different. The problems that you're dealing with, I don't know why, they just seem a little bit different versus when you've got less than 50, and then even in that, 20 to 30, 35 range, it's just a sweet spot. It's a good thing where you can have limited staff that can take really good control and quality care. Because at the end of the day, owners and guests want to call in. They don't want to be transferred. They don't want to be told so-and-so isn't here today. And whoever they do talk to, they want to feel like that person knows them and knows their property. And I'm sure there's some successful companies out there that are at scale that have done this really well. It was just a huge challenge for us. And then it just, that didn't sound fun to me. Keeping it small and being able to pick up the phone and know any owner and everything about their property was where I wanted to fit in the market, especially in Destin, where there's a ton of property managers.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. I really like that idea of being conscious about whatever you're building, right? So it doesn't matter if you want to go for the scale or you want to, keep it boutique. It just matters that you took the time to think about what you wanted and what was right for you specifically, given, your personality, your experience, what you had seen work, not work. So that I find super, super interesting. And I do hear a lot of people arriving to a similar conclusion that, they would rather stay boutique, but, control those relationships, make sure that those relationships are close, make sure that the quality standards are there. So let's talk about the early beginnings of you starting to get homeowners. So you had 9 years of experience, so that was a huge advantage. But what was the most challenging part of actually getting started and going from being a W-2 employee to being an entrepreneur?
Yes. So the most challenging part was that you have this education, you know what your value is, you have a success path behind you, but then you've got to go out and tell all these people, trust me, even though you can't see any of it. And that is so hard. Like, go to my website, be my first owner. There are no reviews,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was very challenging. I feel very grateful though, because what I did not realize was that in those 9 years, I had built a personal brand unknowingly through networking, through being involved in the community. That is honestly what fueled the birth of Breathe Easy as far as owner acquisition, because people knew me. They knew how hard I had worked. They knew just the energy that I carry. And so some of our first homeowners were from friends, local friends that saw that I had started my own company, knew some owners in the area and sent them to me. And then I did have a couple of the owners that I'd worked with that also came over. So it was to a really good start very early. But yeah, I mean, that's another takeaway, that like speaking to the younger generation, it is so important, the conversations you have, how you show up and present yourself. And I'm not saying go be fake by any means, but understanding that who you are and how you participate in the world can absolutely help set some footpaths, different stepping stones for you as you move forward. And so as a mid-age, I guess I'll call myself adult, now it's like, what does that look like moving forward? Like, are the steps I'm taking, relationships I'm building, helping me move towards a path that I want to move into? So definitely very, very interesting, and didn't realize how much that was going to come into my advantage until after it all fell into place.
That is so interesting, right? The fact that you mentioned that it was, without you even realizing that you built that personal brand or trust, uh, within your market. So that's definitely great advice right there. So tell me something. So you managed to sign those first homeowners through, that kind of network that you had built and trust that you had built. When let's say your close circle of people that you knew was over, so to speak, like, and you had to now start finding people elsewhere, homeowners elsewhere, what worked for you the most as far as growing the portfolio that you were managing?
I'm going to start off with the wins. The wins were that I never paid for an owner lead. I think it was really falling back on what I had learned about my personal brand. So we just supported some small local events, and they were cheap. And no, we didn't get in front of thousands of people. But if we got in front of 50 to 100 people and we were just a constant name, to me, it's not necessarily who speaks the loudest, it's who's consistent. And that was my goal in all of our branding and how I built the company, is I want to be consistently known, and just participating in the industry, being in different associations, going to different events was helpful. And really at the end of the day, going back to why I wanted to keep it boutique, is that I know how trust works. And if you build the trust with your owners, it's going to come back to you. They're going to recommend you, and they're going to recommend you to people that they like, which hopefully have similar personality traits, right? And so hopefully will be good alignment, with you. And so most of the owner leads that we got, over the next several years after that were from our own owners that we had.
Got it. So a lot of referrals, which, we always insist on the fact that, I like this saying a lot and I always talk about it. You only market because you don't know. No, you only sell because you don't know how to market. You only market because you don't know how to do product or service, right? So it just goes to say that, when you do product or service the right way, that is the best kind of sales or marketing that you could have. So definitely very interesting. Now, let's talk about, the fact that you after 4 years, you managed to sell the business, right? So before we get into the specifics of how or why, I'm curious to know if this is something that you had in mind since the beginning, like you build with an exit in mind, like some people do, where they know this is a 5-year project. I want to come in, I want to get it to a certain point, and then I want to sell? Or was that something that kind of just happened afterwards?
So a little bit of both. I did know going into it that there was not going to be anyone who was going to take over it in the family. This was my passion project solely. So I knew that there was no one else. I didn't want to bank nor rely on having the perfect employee who was going to want to buy it from me. And so ever since the very beginning, the intentionality was, you're going to sell this business. So yes, and I think that helped a lot, honestly. I can't say that at the prior company we had that mindset at all. It was, this is a family business and this is always going to be a family business. And I'm not saying that's a wrong way to run the company. I just think there are advantages of being prepared that you're going to sell this to someone else eventually. With that said, I thought 10, 15 years, like, I'm still young. I want to work hard. I wanted this so bad. And so what I didn't anticipate was waking up in 2023 going, I don't really know what I'm doing, like where I'm going in my life. And so then that's kind of what I would say kicked off a little bit of some self-exploration, and really trying to figure out who I was, what I wanted. I don't know, midlife crisis. I don't know what people call it. That is when I realized that for me, the property management book needed to close. And that was hard to process. It took a year, but I understood it, and I was kind of at peace with that. And then it was like, okay, so what's next? Now you need to set the business, ready for sale, and then next steps after that. So I did not plan on any of this to only be in 4 years by any means, but it happened that way. And I trusted that if this was the right thing that was supposed to happen, that things would align. And they did.
Wow, that's so interesting. And so you was it something about the business model, or the particular challenges of running a property management operation that you felt was starting to maybe affect you personally, or was it more so like really more of an introspection of saying, is this what I want to be doing, with my days for the rest of my days? No, therefore why delay that decision?
It wasn't the business, because the business never changed. I mean, yes, like there's been the evolution of vacation rentals, obviously a lot, and technology and everything over 13 years. But at the core of it, the business didn't change. You take care of properties, you take care of guests, take care of owners, boom, right? The fundamentals were still there. For me, it was realizing that for the past 13 years, my values were different. My goals were different. My vision in life was very different. And what I'm certain happened is I just started diving into different speakers, hearing different conversations, and thinking, can there be more for me in this life? Can there be something different? And that's when I realized that, with as much passion and care that I put into property management, I was going to have to completely step away, because I could not hire someone and just walk away and let them run it. I believe me, I ran all those scenarios through my head, but I carry so much passion when I do something that I'm either all in or I'm not in.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that about myself. And so that's when, okay, property management's not it. Let's find a different way to serve people.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, and it takes a lot of courage. I really admire that, because you first of all took a leap of faith in starting your own business, right? So that is already something that takes a lot of courage. But then to also decide to put an end to that chapter and move on to something else, after having spent, I'm sure, a lot of time and effort into it. It also takes courage, right? Because a lot of people would just maybe keep at it just because of the fact that they've spent all this time and effort into it, and it's that sunk cost fallacy of like, you'll continue doing something just because of how much you've put into it, but if it's not aligned with where you try to go, then what's the point, right? So what do you think allowed you to make that decision without feeling the regret, or feeling the just the feeling of like, I'm giving up on this project, which is what I'm sure other people could feel by even thinking about selling?
The short answer, I got coached a lot,
Okay.
because that was very difficult. I describe it as an identity crisis, because that's exactly what it is, right? You've put all this time and energy into it, and then you're going to go and start something else completely different, and then you have to separate yourself from this brand that you've created and who everyone knows you as. And it was very challenging. I would say through the entire experience of deciding to sell and then the actual sales process, I got coached a lot, and I cried a lot. So many times of, am I making the right decision? Is this Brittany, just what are you doing? Like, just stay with property management. You know it. You do it well. Like, you are crazy for getting out of this. A lot of those conversations. And I will say, if it wasn't for the coaching that I received and being able to just like process my own thoughts and not have someone else tell me what to do, if I wouldn't have had that, I probably would have been a train wreck. And I can't imagine, to be honest with you, what I would be like right now if I hadn't had that resource.
Wow, that's interesting. And at that point, when you were starting to have that introspection, were you clear on the fact that coaching, talking about coaching and how it helped you, was it clear for you that coaching was going to be the next thing for you as well? That it's where you wanted to spend, time in as far as your next venture went?
Once I had made the decision to sell, that was about when I stepped into coaching and that program of learning and certification. So of course I understood the value more. To keep this simplistic, during 2023, when I was really debating the whole decision though, I had no idea that coaching was going to be the answer. It was just simply as kind of what I said earlier of like, I told you, like, I have a lot of passion and put a lot of energy into everything I did. And so I had conformed to this person and said, Brittany, this is who you're supposed to be. And when something clicked and unlocked that I have limitless opportunities, that I can do whatever the hell I want and nobody can tell me no, like that was it. And that's what I needed then, was to figure out who I wanted to be and who I was. I'll give you a quick story. I hope this puts it into perspective. I was working with a coach at that time, had no idea what my next steps were at all, still trying to figure out what's going on. And she gave me homework where I needed to write my dream. I had all the money in the world, no limitations, write a dream. My dream was literally like, oh, I had a good day today. I was slightly stressed out from work, but it wasn't too bad of a day. And all this basically like negative kind of unhealthy habits. And when she read it, she's like, Brittany, your dream life is that you have stress at work. And I was like, yeah, that's normal. Like everybody's like that. And to a point they are, but that shouldn't be in your perfect dream. And I bring that story up because I had to unwire these processes and thoughts in my head of this is who you're supposed to be and this is what life is supposed to look like. It's not supposed to be fun and games. It's supposed to be hard work. It's supposed to be painful. And I cried a lot again, and had to unwire. And I mean, we had to unpack some stuff into that went back into my childhood and everything. Like, why do I think this way? Like, why do I feel like this is healthy in the right way? And by unpacking all of that and finally understanding what my true values were and what I really wanted to do in life, that was like the plateau. And then it was like, okay, so then where do you go next steps from there?
Wow. That's very interesting. And thanks for sharing that. I think that you're right about the fact that sometimes we associate what we do with who we are, and we kind of think that they're the same thing. And it's hard to break that association, right? As far as like, what I do is not what I am, and I am whatever I want to be. And whatever I want to be doesn't have to be what I am doing currently. So anyways, we're getting philosophical here, but I do find this super interesting. Now let's talk about the process of selling for a second, just as far as lessons that you learn along the way, because selling a business it sounds fun as far as the outcome goes, but it's always a process of a lot of back and forth, a lot of documentation, a lot of due diligence, a lot of trying to package the business in a way that is actually sellable. So tell us a little bit about what you learned throughout this process, as if you were giving advice to a property management company that wants to position themselves in a way that they can sell and get the most out of that transaction.
Absolutely. Number one, listen to any podcast that you can from people who have sold in the industry. I believe I listened to Sarah Bradford and Heather Bayer, their podcasts when they had sold. Listen to that at conferences if you can. Go to any of the sessions that talk about selling your business. Talk to people, network in the industry. And if you can even if it's a vendor that can connect you with someone who has sold, those were some of my most valuable conversations during the process. We're connecting with people who had sold in the past 5 years and saying, I'm thinking about selling. Tell me what I don't know. And the wealth of knowledge that they will share with you is profound. At a simplistic level, clean numbers, clean financial hygiene is number one. Number two, get yourself as far out of the business as you can, if possible. Makes it more appealing for people to purchase. And then I think the third thing would be really have an understanding of what are the important outcomes for you. Is this financial? If you are mentally exhausted, how long do you want to stay and help transfer the business? Like, you really, really have to understand what is it that I want to get out of it. Otherwise, I feel like if you don't have that clarity and if you don't refocus that as needed, you're going to wind up with resentment during the sale, post-sale, and that's not good.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, talking to people, listening to education resources. Now, getting yourself out of the business, as far away from the business as possible. That is something I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on, because it is a challenge, right? It is a challenge to, especially when you have a type A personality where you're passionate about what you do, you care about the business, you care about your guests, your owners, to go ahead and do that, to go ahead and get yourself out of the day-to-day. So how did you achieve that? What worked for you in terms of truly being able to delegate, and then how much delegation is too much delegation versus how much oversight you still need to be doing on top of things? So just walk us through your process of like removing yourself from the business, like you said.
I think you could never delegate too much. Delegate as much as you can, shift it around to the people who can take care of it the best for you. And obviously, if you're having to go behind them, maybe they're not the right person. Maybe they need more training, so take time on that. I mentioned this to you earlier, of that I was cognizant going into this that I was going to be selling at some point. And so I was very vigilant in that, like, we had one email address and we had one phone number. As simplistic as those two things are, if an owner, I guess, ever contacted, everything was always a we, even when I was the only employee. And so as I built the team and as staff goes in and out, owners and guests aren't seeing that. They're not seeing your turnover. And also, I mean, I'm not going to lie, there were probably 90% of owner conversations where owners thought that they were texting and emailing me, and it was my staff. And they all knew the way that I communicated. I found the right people. We all communicated similarly. And so that was a huge thing, was that I didn't have to hop into those conversations and deal with that day to day, because A, the team had access, and B, we had I would say nowadays that people would probably use the words like brand voice. So all the team was responding in similar ways, had access to all of the information. And, as I did try to wean myself further and further out, again, it was delegating things. Most people like more work. I would tell you, nobody was overworked. And so it was, hey, I've got this project. Do you want to do it? Sure. People love to help. And so being able to pass off as much of that was definitely helpful.
Mm-hmm. And was there a timeline of functions and departments that you started delegating, progressively, and something you would say about like functions that you had a harder time with delegating versus others?
Really the only thing that comes top of mind when you ask that question is figure out what you don't like to do and get it subbed out first. Because that's draining your energy. Like, I'm a super creative person. But I do not like marketing and sending email campaigns and making social posts and stuff like that. And so that was one thing. It was, when I think about it, pass that off, because that's just stealing your energy, and somebody else who's good at it and loves to do it is obviously going to do one heck of a job better. So that was definitely the first part of it. And then, really, I think just as we built the team, it was creating standard operating procedures, creating organizational flows. I did not. So I feel like I'm going to go against my word here. I had a lot of standardization, but I wasn't really good at writing a lot of the stuff down. So that was a challenge. As I was building the team, there was so much stuff in my head. And so we started having to create Loom videos, Google Docs. And what I would tell anybody at this point, whether they're starting out or in it, is the sooner you can get that stuff started, the better. Hopefully keep it updated. If not, at least the fundamentals are there. But that's what you need, because you need the team to be able to look back at things. I have like a photographic memory, so I can remember the screen and you click this button and this and that. Well, somebody else who doesn't have that needs that checklist item. And so anything that you can do with a visual aid as well as a written aid, I think would be very helpful as you're trying to get any of it out and separate it all out. Some people might not agree with me on it, but here's how to make a reservation. Here's how to update a reservation, how to cancel. Like, everything was separated so that way you can find the one document that you need with the one subject matter right at hand. And that was very helpful for the team to be able to go in and find exactly what they need instead of trying to go through like 100-page training book.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And when it comes to, M&A, and the process of buying companies and whatnot, there's always also the topic of valuation. We don't have to get into the specifics, but just as far as, branding, right? You mentioned that branding was an important aspect of the way you decided to build your business. And I'm always curious to understand like how much that branding component plays into the valuation of a business, right? Because at the end of the day, depending on, who's buying, there's going to be, strategic acquisitions. There's going to be, aqua hires where you're just trying to hire the team. There's going to be hires where, you basically, are going to be very numbers oriented around, the revenue, the EBITDA, the multiples, all those things. But in your case, what would you say was the biggest asset, that you were actually selling? Of course, the management contracts is the underlying asset, but, was it the brand? Was it the team? Was it, the fact that, you had this very well tuned in operation that, would allow anyone to very easily kind of incorporate it into theirs? What would you say made your company, valuable in that sense?
I think for us, and with the buyers that I wound up going with, it was more of team and brand. I'll be honest, they asked very minimal questions about the actual operation ahead of time. But one of their biggest concerns was, what's the team look like and do we get all of them? Because they knew that my request was to be out as soon as possible. And that was also very comforting for me, because the last thing I want to do is build a business, step away from it, have a new identity, and then get to tell 10 people that they don't have a job. Like, ugh. So that was one of my big things, was I need them to keep the team. Now, if it's not a great fit afterwards, that is not within my control, but I want these people to still have their job in some shape, form, or fashion. So again, that was really big with them. And then I do think that the branding absolutely helped. To your point, depending on who the purchaser is, some larger companies might not care because they have their own brand that they can, slap on the billboard and and not skip a beat. But if you do have a smaller company, or like in my case, it was a buyer who purchased another management company and wanted to run them parallel because we had, even though we're in the same area, had different clientele and different types of properties. And so they didn't want to merge them under one umbrella. They wanted to be able to have the two separate entities with the different clients and expectations. So, and that was one thing. As we reviewed several offers, I can say the one consistent feedback that I got back was, wow, you've built a really good brand in just 4 years. And to me, Breathe Easy it was a way of life. It was a vibe. It was not a vacation rental business. It was, and that's just, I guess it just came from inside me. I don't know. But just in everything we did, it's like everything's just like the Breathe Easy way. And of course, we branded everything we could. But that was pretty cool to get that feedback during that process and realize how many other companies actually, not even knowing anything about us, just in the discovery phase, were able to see what an impactful brand we had in just 4 years. So I think that definitely comes into play quite a bit if you can and want to build that out.
Yeah, no, and sometimes, I feel like this concept of branding is a little bit abstract in some people's head, and I like the idea of trying to break things down into, like, okay, practically speaking, what is this? What is a brand? How do you build a brand? So I don't know. I've heard a definition that I like about branding. Let me know what you think about it, which is like associations, basically, that people make between a certain feeling or a certain emotion or a certain outcome, even in some cases, and your particular company, right? So those associations can be positive when it's, good branding, or negative and it's still branding, right? So as far as that goes, if we were to take that, definition, what are the elements, or the outcomes, or the feelings that you were trying to make people feel. Of course, Breathe Easy says something about what that is, but then how did you actually put it in practice? Once you had the concept of a brand, how do you, as a founder, actually go about building that brand? Not talking about the colors of the page here, or the font. I mean, some people think that is brand, but you know I would disagree with the fact that it's just about the colors that you choose, and just about the font that you decide to choose. I think it's more about everything that you were alluding to, as far as the team and whatnot. So how did you build that brand, basically?
Love your point, and I would agree. To me, branding was not what are we going to call ourselves. It was how are we going to make people feel. And so that from the messages that went out, text, email, social media, whatever it was breathe easy. Hey, let us take care of this. You breathe easy. So it's all about that tone, very happy, upbeat, and kumbaya, I would say, in a sense. And then, you narrow it down into the specific properties, going back to standardization, the amenities that you choose, the placement of the amenities, how organized or not you keep the property inside. I'm a stickler, and every time I walked a property for an inspection, every coffee cup handle got pulled the exact same way. So when you open the cabinet, you could just pull it right out. Some people think I'm psychotic. I may be, but what did I want people to notice and feel? I wanted them, as a guest, to walk in, open the cabinet, and go, oh, wow, somebody paid attention to this. Oh, they didn't just throw this stuff in here. That's just so nice. That's how I wanted them to feel. So it was all these tiny little things, the way that we made our beds, the way that we placed our towels, every single thing that we did was because I wanted them to go when they saw it. And it's hard. I didn't read a book from it. It was just, I don't know, like in my blood, in my soul, and relaying that to the team then is obviously very important because you need to have everybody else on the same page as you to make sure that you are staying consistent amongst your staff and everything. But, to your point, again, I would say it is the words you choose, the fonts, the colors, it's all of that stuff. But then it's also the smallest of details that people will notice, and they might take many of them for granted. But I believe that it was what helped our brand grow so quickly. And I can't tell you the percentage of return renters that we had offhand, but I know that I was amazed at how many repeat renters we had just within 4 years. Because I think the other thing with when you're clear with your brand, keep going back to this word, you're going to be consistent. And that's what people want to build the trust. If you're not being consistent and thinking about, if I do this, if I say this, how are they going to feel? And does that match the message I want them? Then you're not aligned. Then you're not consistent and people are confused. Now, not everyone's going to get your message the same way, right? We all interpret things differently. But I think for the most part, you can spending time on that and getting very comfortable with who you want to be and how you want other people to see you I think it's undervalued in the industry.
Wow. I love that. And it's all those little details, like you said, that add up and when they're consistent enough, will build that trust over time. And it's a great example that so long as those details are consistent, it doesn't have to be a 10-year project, building a solid brand, that I find super interesting. Now, there's brand on the guest side of things, and then there's brand on the owner side of things. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether for you it was something that you would just kind of put into the one same bucket of just like the brand, versus like you were very specific about, okay, these are the efforts we're doing to build brand for guests, and these are the things we're doing to build brand for owners.
That's a fun question. I think that they definitely cross over, but they're different clientele. They have different wants of you. And to me, I think that really goes into knowing who you want to represent. And so like we wanted owners who really cared about their properties, who really cared about the guest experience. So what I mean by that was, if you were an owner who continued to band-aid something, it would not listen to my safety or recommendations of, hey, this is something we really need to do, you did not stay on the program, or you didn't get signed up. And so, with that said, what I wanted was, I knew that I wanted to work with this certain like clientele of this owner. I knew what aspects I liked and enjoyed from them. And so it did come into play with the branding, because what I knew of those owners was that every time they came into town with other management, it was, oh my God, I have to spend all this time fixing all these things. My property manager didn't even tell me this was here, that this was broken, and I don't even know what they're doing. Oh man, you just broken that trust bubble. So with Breathe Easy, I want the owners to feel the same thing. I want them to come in and just breathe easy. And yes, you have to do, annual maintenance and stuff like that, but it's not that you're coming in and having to tell me all these things. Listen to your clients and having that alignment. And they knew, everything that we did, I felt was just so like full circle. I mean, anything that we did for a guest in the sense of like how we made the beds impacted the owner. And now a conversation I had with the owner is different, right? Like with the owner, it's like, hey, we need cleanliness. We need this, we need that. With a guest, it was, I want you to have a hotel-like experience, because that creates comfort for you, because we all trust hotels. Well, for the most part, trust hotels, And so I think you can I think you can determine your brand, how you want to make people feel, what are all the different actions and things underneath that, and then decide if I'm talking to an owner, if I'm talking to a guest, do I need to come at it from a different perspective or is it the same messaging?
Yeah, no, definitely. The foundation, so to speak, of the brand is going to be one, but then how you apply that to the owner versus the guest is, of course, gonna vary. And just to close the loop on the acquisition, if you were to do it all over again, what would you do differently, or what do you wish you had started doing as far as maybe that financial hygiene you were talking about, or like whatever else it is that you wish you had just started from day one, that you then realized in the process of selling that it added some additional friction or complexity to the transaction?
I had financial hygiene from the beginning because I knew how painful it was to not have that. So I think for me, it maybe would have been trying to get myself further out of it sooner, because I do think where the shock hit was telling the staff. It seemed like the owners could swallow it because for the most part, they understood this was business. They weren't necessarily excited, right? To hear about it. But I think they absorbed it. And that's all my perception. I think they absorbed it differently. The staff, though, because I was in the field, we were running very lean this past year. I knew I was selling. I didn't want to have all this extra payroll and have all this additional staff to pass off going into the slow season for a buyer. And so I was still very involved in that, honestly, at the end, more than I would have liked to have been. And so I think that was hard, is a Monday calling your staff and saying like, hey, I know that we were just, laughing together 2 days ago and, but you have new owners now. And so the emotional connection between myself being so involved in the staff at that point was difficult. And I wish I had had more separation.
Interesting. That's interesting. Well, that's great. And now let's talk a little bit about that next chapter of yours with the coaching side of things. Tell us a little bit about Discover Freedom. What is it about? And, who is it for? What are you trying to accomplish? What's your vision? So that we know what's the next chapter for Brittany here.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. It was funny because it was like, all right, Brittany, like you've got this clean slate now. So where do you want to go? And I would say the first decision was, once I decided coaching, it was, do I stay in the vacation rental industry or not? And I weaved and bobbed back and forth because I can go anywhere now. And my heart keeps bringing me right back to the vacation rental industry. And so, what I have realized is that you tend to coach people who are much like yourselves. And so with a little bit of reflection, what I realized is that you have amazing leaders in the vacation rental industry. And we have awesome conferences, education, podcasts, all these things, right? Webinars. And they all tell you how to run your business, how to be more profitable, how to get more owners, more guests, be hospitable, take care of your employees, build company culture, all this amazing stuff. But nobody is taking care of that leader and saying, hey, I know that that's a lot of weight to carry. What do you need to be successful, to carry all of these parts of the business? So that's honestly where I want to direct my attention right now, because I think we have some amazing people in this industry. And I think I'm going to be a little dramatic with this, but I think there's a mental health crisis because we're taught to give, 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 give. And nobody talks about you as a person and what you need to do to be that support beam for everybody else. So if I can come in with my coaching and work with these leaders, let's talk about what's stressing you out. Because at the end of the day, if you're exhausted and you're tired and beaten down and you have all the stress of owning your own business, which is a whole separate podcast, like if you have all this stuff, you're not showing up 100%. You may think you are. You're going to tell everybody you are. But you're not showing up to your fullness because you're tired, because it's exhausting. So if that means weaving in personal, professional conversations, helping change your perspective, figure out the obstacles, like what is driving you crazy? What are your deepest fears? Like, let's get all that stuff mushed out and let's support the leader who then can go to the conferences and learn all this other amazing education and take care of their business and team.
Wow, I love that. That's amazing. And I'm curious, when it comes to coaching, right? I feel like there's people that have already benefited from coaching, and so they already know, okay, coaching works, and this is something that makes sense. And then there's people that might be skeptical or have never experienced a coach. And just the idea of a coach sounds like, oh, I don't need a coach. What will a coach tell me that I don't know already, or that I, that I cannot figure out on my own? So what would you say to someone that's open-minded but new to the idea of why coaching can be beneficial, and what it entails, and what will your approach be? Because I'm sure that you're going to have a unique approach, that's for sure. I can already tell from the name, Discover Freedom. You're pretty intentional with your branding there. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So the biggest thing for me is that I am an ontological coach, which in human terms, English, means that I coach the whole person. So I basically am trained to listen to you and understand how you're perceiving the world. And that's what we work on. And so with that said, I ask questions. I am not telling you what I've done, what I did, what I think you should do. I don't think you're broken. I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I just want to help you shine and just get to this whole new level and just have a different perspective. I don't have it with me, but I did this the other day with someone where I took a Rubik's Cube and I put it between us. And I said, well, how many green squares do you see? She said 2. I said, no, there's 1. And we got into a little tiff back and forth because she saw 2 and I saw 1. And I said, this is coaching. Come over here. And so she came over to my side and she saw 1. So that's what I do in a very basic model, is just help shape and change your approach to things of, let's look at this from a different angle. And does that now change the perception that you have? So this fear that you had, this limiting belief that you've just gotten used to because it's all you've known, what can we unpack? What can we explore with that? And then how do we move forward? And so, I will say you've got to be open for it to really get its roots. Like, you've got to be open and want to change, want to grow, want to evolve. If you come in just, this is stupid, this isn't going to work for me, it's going to be pretty awkward. But if you're at least willing to try it, it's amazing how deep of conversations that I've gotten into people. And it's this crazy thing that happened in their childhood that is holding them back as a 40, 50-year-old professional. And so it's just stuff like that they realize, oh my God, this has been getting in my way this entire time. I didn't think about it that way. Now I get it. And this is kind of like you toss it out of the way or whatever. And now you can go be more successful. You can have more energy. So it's insanely powerful. I'm a little weird with the word transformational, but I will tell you, having been through coaching the past year myself, it is absolutely transformational, even if you think nothing's wrong with you.
Wow, that's interesting. No, that is very interesting, because I mean, when you put it that way, of with the example of the Rubik cube, it's interesting because you will see things your way, and we will all have blind spots, and so unless you unless someone else can see things together with you and challenge your thinking sometimes as well, then it's very hard to get to conclusions that are going to be, you know that are going to move the needle in any kind of way, or make you take decisions that are drastic in a sense, because you're only going to be listening to people, especially if you're a leader. I can think of being a leader where your team is not going to challenge you. Your team is not going to, hopefully to some degree, yes, at some point, but like, your team is not going to tell you, no, you got this wrong, this is not the problem, because they report to you, right, as a leader. So having that person, and I've never had a coach personally, but I have had experiences where just from having a conversation with someone, you end the conversation, like, and you see things a different way. And so that's the power of conversation, right? That's the power of, and I love that you said it was asking questions. Is really, guiding you into thinking deeper about certain things. And love what you're doing. I mean, it sounds super interesting. So thank you for having shared some of that. And where can people, get in touch if they want to learn more about your coaching services, or just, anything about, follow you online or whatever?
Yeah, we've got Discover Freedom has a Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And then I personally am on LinkedIn as well and do stuff there. So you can pretty much find me anywhere. I just haven't made it to TikTok yet.
That's gonna be the next one, the next platform. Yeah, I know. I put stuff in there, but you know what's funny? I used to say I will never go into TikTok because it's gonna make me lose all this time, and I've pretty much stayed consistent with that. But then I used to watch a ton of YouTube, and it used to be all long format, and I was all happy about the fact that I would never get distracted because I wasn't opening TikTok. And then Shorts arrived on YouTube, and now I'm as distracted on YouTube as I would have been on TikTok, because Shorts have arrived to YouTube. So anyways, we can't run away from that distraction, it seems like, but we do our best.
Exactly. Or, you got to do what I do. Because I'm the same way. I had to put an app on my phone that limits the amount of time. It's like a child lock for myself. When you're on a social media site for more than 30 minutes, it turns the app off for the rest of the day. And I was like, this is so stupid, but I need it because they're good. They're good at those algorithms.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you gotta like mental hack yourself, then do whatever you need to do.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, no, I went 5 years ago, I went to the extreme of deleting all of my social media because I tried those apps, and then I would just like hack my way through those apps. Like I would find a bug in the app where I could still access the app even though it was supposed to be locked. So then I was like, okay, no, I gotta get it off this thing. So yeah, funny enough, I completely deleted all my social media 5 years ago, and then now I'm back. But anyways,
it's hilarious.
Thank you for your time, Brittany. This was very fun, and thanks so much for having shared so many insights.
Oh, thank you so much. This was fun.